What did you do to my babies? Marcus Waverly barked at 3:00 a.m., his voice slicing through the penthouse suite like broken glass. For 3 months, no amount of money, Swiss pediatric nurses' imported formula high-tech cribs that mimicked a heartbeat had bought him the one thing he craved: silence. His wife was gone. Taken by childbirth, and left behind were 3 newborn boys whose non-stop screaming felt like punishment carved into sound. Then suddenly the crying stopped. Marcus froze at the nursery door, dread swelling in his throat. He flung it open, ready for disaster, and found something that didn't fit his world of polished marble and controlled air. Warm lamplight. The AC shut off, and sprawled across his king-size bed was Nia Brooks, the 22-year-old black housekeeper he'd hired to scrub bathrooms. Still wearing yellow cleaning gloves, she slept face down from sheer exhaustion. Curled against her were his triplets, peaceful, breathing, slow, cheeks pink. One of them resting on her back, tiny fingers gripping her apron like it was a lifeline. The room smelled faintly of herbs and smoke, earthy and old, and it yanked a buried childhood memory out of Marcus like a hook. Instead of gratitude, suspicion snapped tight. Herbs. Witchcraft, he hissed, and in a surge of pride and fear he fired her on the spot. The second Nia left, the spell broke. The babies howled, monitors blared, and one child began to turn purple, choking on his own cries. Marcus ran barefoot and shattered down to the service basement where he found Nia dragging a plastic bag of her belongings. He thrust the limp baby toward her, tears falling freely. Nia didn't scold. She pressed the child to her chest, whispered a lullaby, and brought him back, proving what money never could: the cure wasn't luxury. It was human warmth. Back upstairs, the suite looked like a showroom for miracles that never arrived. The nursery glowed with screens, sensors, and imported gadgets humming at a steady 72 degrees. Yet the air felt colder than a church at dawn. Marcus watched Nia move through the room like she belonged there, not rushing, not performing, just present. She lowered the rescued baby into the nest she'd made with pillows and her own warmth, and the other 2 reached for her with shaky little arms, as if their bodies remembered what his money couldn't replicate. Marcus swallowed hard. "I flew in specialists," he said, voice thin. "I bought the best. Why didn't it work?" Nia didn't argue. She simply glanced at the high-tech crib, its robotic heartbeat pulsing like a lie, and then at the babies' faces, still wet from screaming. "Because none of that holds you," she whispered, pressing her palm to her chest. "They don't need perfection. They need someone breathing with them." He'd tried everything before tonight: nurses who tapped their watch's formula warmed to exact degrees, white noise machines turned up until the walls vibrated. One by one, the professionals quit leaving invoices on the counter like receipts for failure. Marcus remembered begging the on-call pediatrician at 3:30 a.m., offering double, triple, until the man sighed and said the only next step was sedation. Marcus had stared at 3 tiny arms and pictured needles, and for the first time in his life, his fortune felt like dead weight in his hands. Now, standing beside Nia, he looked at the sleeping boys and felt the truth settle in his ribs. All his spending had built a gilded cage. The only thing that had ever calmed them was the one thing he'd never learned to provide: human warmth, steady and unbought. Marcus tried to hold on to that quiet, tried to let it soften him, but then the scent rose again, stubborn as smoke in a closed room. Not baby powder, not expensive disinfectant. Something wild, like crushed leaves, damp earth, and a faint burn of wood. It slipped past his guard and cracked open a memory he'd spent decades sealing shut, a 5-year-old boy on a thin mattress. Fever-slick skin, a rough hand rubbing his chest, a voice humming low to keep the night away. His jaw tightened. He stared at Nia. Her sleeves pushed up her palm, resting on one baby's back like a steady metronome, and the tenderness in his chest curdled into panic. In Marcus's world, solutions came with receipts and credentials. This didn't. This looked like something he couldn't control. "What is that smell?" he demanded, too loud, too sharp. The babies flinched, one mouth puckered, trembling on the edge of a scream. Nia blinked, startled, then lowered her eyes. "It's just rue and rosemary, sir. A little wash. And a song." "A song," Marcus let out a dry laugh that didn't sound like him. "You think I'm going to let what folk remedies near my sons? You have any idea how fragile they are?" Nia's throat bobbed. She kept her voice steady anyway. "They weren't crying from pain, Mr. Waverly. They were cold." "The room is 72 degrees, he snapped, pointing at the thermostat like it was a weapon. Nia finally looked up, and her gaze didn't challenge him. It pierced him. "Not that kind of cold," she said softly. "They're cold from missing their mother." For a second, the sweet went weightless. Marcus felt the words land where grief lived, and because he didn't know how to carry that feeling, he did the one thing he'd always done when cornered. He straightened, voice going ice. "Get out, you're done here." The moment Nia Brooks crossed the threshold, the room seemed to lose its oxygen. The warm lamplight Marcus hadn't noticed before suddenly felt dim and useless, like a candle in a storm. The triplets, Aiden, Miles, and Jonah, went from whimpering to full-throated screaming in seconds, their tiny faces turning red, then blotchy, their fists punching the air like they were fighting something invisible. The monitors Marcus had insisted on installing began to chirp and climb, flashing numbers that meant nothing to him, except panic. He lunged from crib to crib, clumsy hands trying to soothe. He offered pacifiers that cost more than his first car. He rocked the smart bassinet until his shoulders burned. He pressed his cheek to a baby's forehead and felt the heat, the damp, the trembling. Then the baby arched away from him, as if Marcus's expensive cologne was a warning label. "Please," he whispered, voice cracking, "Daddy's here. You're safe." The words sounded rehearsed, hollow, like a speech at a board meeting. At 3:30 a.m., he called Dr. Ethan Hart, the concierge pediatrician he paid to answer any time. Marcus held the phone toward the nursery so the doctor could hear the chaos. On the other end, a tired exhale. "Their tests are fine," the doctor said, almost bored. "If you insist, we can sedate them, but there are risks at this age." "Sedate them." Needles. Silence bought by chemicals. Marcus stared at 3 writhing bodies no bigger than bread loaves and felt his stomach turn. "No," he breathed. "No drugs." The line went dead, and in that horrible pounding noise, one thing stayed quietly, cruelly, the faint scent of rue and rosemary, still clinging to the sheets like a reminder that the only real comfort had just walked out the door. The screaming didn't just fill the suite. It changed it. It rattled in Marcus Waverly's teeth, in the glass, in the bones of the expensive furniture, like the whole penthouse was turning into a drum. He stumbled to the right-hand crib, trying to steady his hands, trying to remember what the nurses did: tilt the head, pat the back, shush softly. Anything. Then, without warning, the sound cut off. Not peace, absence. Marcus spun toward the crib and felt his blood drop cold. Jonah, the smallest, was rigid and limp, at the same time his face darkening from red to a terrifying shade of purple. His mouth was open in a silent scream, eyes wide and wet, but no air came out. "No, no, no, no," Marcus rasped, yanking him up too fast, then freezing, terrified he'd break him. He bounced him awkwardly, patted too hard, too soft, nothing worked. Jonah's tiny chest didn't rise. "Breathe," Marcus begged, forehead pressed to the baby's temple like prayer. "Please." Please, kiddo, don't you do this." His voice cracked into something small and boyish, the voice he never used in boardrooms. He ran. Barefoot shirt half untucked, Jonah cradled against his chest as if Marcus could donate oxygen by force. The marble hallway blurred. 2 security guards stared like they didn't recognize the hotel owner at all. "Elena!" Nia Marcus shouted, slamming the service elevator button with his elbow. "Stop her! Don't let her leave!" In the basement corridor, under harsh fluorescent light, he saw her Nia Brooks' shoulders slumped, a plastic bag of belongings dragging behind her. She turned alarm flashing across her face until she saw the baby. Marcus nearly collapsed at her feet, thrusting Jonah forward like an offering. "He's not breathing," he choked. I can't, please. Save him." Nia didn't lecture. She didn't hesitate. She just reached out, took Jonah, and held him like she'd been waiting for this moment all along. Nia didn't shake. Jonah didn't panic. Didn't even look at Marcus like he deserved an explanation. She pulled the baby against her chest wool sweater to fragile skin, and everything about her changed, like a switch flipped from employee to protector. With one steady hand, she pressed a firm spot low on Jonah's back, and with the other she cupped his head, lowering her mouth to the crown like she was speaking directly to his lungs. "Shh. Come back, little bird," she murmured words, soft but urgent breath warm against his hair. Marcus stood there, useless hands hovering in the air, watching her lips move and realizing he'd never once spoken to his sons like they could actually hear his heart. 1 second. 2. 3, each one stretching into a lifetime. Then Jonah's body jolted with a deep gulp of air, a cough that sounded like life clawing its way back, and the purple drained from his cheeks as pink returned in a slow, miraculous bloom. Marcus's knees buckled. He hit the concrete floor hard, not caring about the dust, the cold, the humiliation of it. Tears ran down his face, unchecked, splashing onto his expensive shirt as if the fabric could finally tell the truth. Nia rocked Jonah and the baby, still trembling, nestled into the hollow of her neck, like he recognized home in her heartbeat. She lifted her eyes to Marcus, not triumphant, just heartbreakingly calm. "They don't understand pride, Mr. Waverly," she said quietly. "They only understand love." And for the first time since his wife died, Marcus let himself break because he finally knew what his sons had been screaming for. Back in the service elevator, Marcus stood pressed against the cold metal wall, breathing like he'd just run a marathon, while Nia held Jonah close and kept humming low, steady, the kind of sound that doesn't ask permission to heal you. The doors opened onto the penthouse floor, and the other 2, Aiden and Miles, were still screaming hoarse and furious, as if they'd been abandoned in the world's brightest, loneliest museum. Marcus rushed to the dimmers with shaking hands. Nia didn't wait for instructions. She stepped into the nursery, scooped Aiden into one arm and Miles into the other, with a calm that made Marcus ache, and sat in the expensive rocker he'd never once used. Then she sang soft at first, then clearer, a lullaby with a strange turn of melody, a line about the moon coming down over the ridge to check on the babies. Marcus's stomach dropped. His whole body tightened like a door slammed shut in his chest. He knew that song. Not from the radio, not from a book. From a small house he hadn't seen in 15 years. From a woman he'd buried alive with his silence. "Where did you learn that?" he whispered, voice cracking in a way he couldn't hide. Nia blinked, surprised by the fear in his eyes. "My godmother taught me," she said gently. "Miss Lila May. She's an older lady. Lives out past the last streetlight in that little neighborhood folks call Hope Hollow." The name hit him like a fist. Marcus reached for the crib rail to stay upright. "Lila May," he repeated, barely breathing. He looked at his sons, finally settling, finally safe, and the truth rose undeniable and brutal. "That woman," he said, tears pooling fast, "is my mother. He swallowed hard like the words had thorns. "And we're going to her, right now." At 5:15 a.m., the marble lobby of the Waverly Hotel witnessed something no guest would have believed if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes. Marcus Waverly Hare, a mess shirt wrinkled, carrying 2 infant carriers like they were ticking bombs, pushing through the revolving door with his shoulder. Behind him, Nia Brooks hugged Jonah to her chest, a diaper bag slung over one arm, her lullaby still vibrating in the air like a thread holding the night together. "Sir, your driver security," the night clerk started half rising. Marcus didn't slow down. "Keys," he snapped. Voice raw. "I'm driving." The black SUV swallowed them, and the city slid past in blurred streetlights and empty intersections. Inside, the triplets finally slept, tiny mouths, slack fists unclenched, while Marcus gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned chalk white. "Is she sick?" he asked, staring straight ahead, as if looking at Nia might shatter him. Nia watched the skyline fade into low buildings and dark lots. "Her knees hurt when it rains," she said. "She coughs from the wood stove. But that's not what's taking her." She paused, letting the truth land. "Loneliness is. She sits by the window every afternoon, waiting on a son who never comes. Money can pay bills, Mr. Waverly, but it can't put arms around somebody. When the asphalt gave way to patched road, then dirt." Marcus's stomach tightened. The air changed wood smoke, damp, earth-frying tortillas somewhere nearby, a scent that reached back 15 years and grabbed him by the throat. The SUV crawled into Hope Hollow past small homes and early risers, who stopped to stare. Finally, Nia pointed. "That's it." A little house, a crooked fence, flower cans lined up like soldiers. Marcus cut the engine. Silence roared. He looked at his sleeping sons, then at the front door. "What if she won't forgive me?" he whispered. Nia opened her door and said softly, "Then you'll still knock." Marcus lifted the carriers out of the SUV with hands that didn't feel like his own, the plastic handles biting into his palms as if reminding him he couldn't run this time. Nia stepped beside him, Jonah snug against her chest, and together they walked the short stretch to the faded blue door, maybe 60 feet, but it felt like a mile through wet dirt and old ghosts. A porch light glowed behind a thin curtain. Someone was awake. Someone had been awake before the sun for years. Marcus raised his fist, hesitated, then knocked 3 times, metal on metal, sharp in the quiet. Inside a chair scraped. Slow slippers shuffled. A voice, rough with age and sleep, floated through the door. "Who's there this early?" The latch slid back with a tired groan. Lila May appeared small in the doorway, wrapped in a worn shawl, hair like soft silver cotton eyes narrowed against the gray dawn. She stared at Marcus's expensive suit, now streaked with dust, his face swollen from crying, and didn't recognize him, not at first. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked carefully, already bracing for bad news. Marcus's throat worked like it was swallowing rocks. He set the carriers down gently on the porch boards like laying down fragile truth, then dropped to his knees right there in the dirt. The word came out cracked and childlike. "Mama." Lila May froze. The paper bag in her hand slipped and hit the ground. "What? What did you say?" Marcus lifted his face into the porch light, tears shining. "It's me," he whispered. "Marcus, I came back." Her breath hitched, and she leaned forward, searching his features like a prayer until her hand, crooked with arthritis, touched his cheek. "Lord have mercy," she breathed. Then her gaze flicked to the carriers, to the tiny movements inside. Marcus swallowed hard. "I didn't come alone," he said. "I brought you your grandsons." Inside Lila May's house, the air was dim and warm, lit by a single kitchen bulb that made everything feel honest. The place was small, scuffed floor, mismatched chairs, a table that leaned a little to the left, but it smelled like cinnamon coffee and clean soap, like someone had been fighting to keep dignity alive with nothing but willpower. Marcus stepped in like a giant in a childhood memory, holding his breath as if one wrong move could break the moment. Lila May hovered over the carriers, hands trembling, then stopping halfway, hesitating the way older folks do when they're afraid their touch might ruin something precious. "They're so clean," she whispered, glancing at her own fingers, stained from morning chores. "I don't want to dirty them. Those are rich babies." "No," Marcus cut in, soft but fierce. He gently took her hands, those bent, hard-working hands, and held them like they were the only proof of love that mattered. "These hands are worth more than everything I own." His voice cracked. "They weren't sick in the body, Mama. They were empty. They were screaming in a palace because there was no warmth in it." Naya stood near the stove, quiet as a witness, while Lila May finally lifted Aiden out, tucking him against her shoulder, under her shawl. Marcus's chest seized, waiting for the baby to reject her the way he'd rejected every luxury. But Aiden's face softened. His tiny fist closed around Lila May's crooked finger like it had been searching for it all along. The crying never came. Lila May let out a broken laugh that turned into tears. "He knows me," she whispered, kissing the baby's forehead. Marcus sank onto the nearest chair, shaking, as if his pride had finally collapsed under the weight of something gentler, something true. Nia stepped forward like she'd been holding her breath for hours. She didn't speak to Marcus the way employees did. She spoke the way family does when the truth is the only thing left. "Mr. Waverly," she said gently, eyes on the babies tucked against Lila May's shawl. The doctors couldn't find anything because it wasn't their bellies. It was everything around them. She tapped her chest once, quiet but firm. "Babies feel what adults hide. They felt your grief. They felt you floating, no roots, no warmth to lean on." Marcus's lips trembled. He looked at Lila May's hands, twisted with arthritis, still steady, as she rocked Aiden, then at his own hands, soft from boardrooms and leather steering wheels. "I built all that glass and marble," he whispered, voice thin, and it was colder than this little kitchen. Lila May didn't even glance at the fancy suit or the polished watch. She kept her focus on the baby's breathing, slow and even. Then she looked down at Marcus the way a mother looks at a grown son who's finally telling the truth. "Lift your face," she said, half command, half comfort. He obeyed, eyes wet, shoulders caving in. "I don't deserve you," he choked out. 15 years, Mama. I left you staring out that window alone." Lila May reached out and cupped his cheek with a hand that had scrubbed other people's floors and still managed to stay tender. "You've always been my boy," she said softly. "I forgave you the day you walked out because I knew you were scared." Marcus let out a shaky breath like something unclenched inside him. Outside the neighborhood was waking up. Inside, 3 tiny bodies settled deeper into the arms that remembered them like the whole family had finally found the missing piece and clicked back into place. Marcus didn't leave that morning, not back to the penthouse, not back to the life where pain got buried under polished stone. In Lila May's kitchen, time slowed into small, real things, steam rising off a chipped mug, the soft squeak of the crooked table. Jonah's tiny fingers curling around his grandmother's shawl like it was the safest place on earth. Marcus stood up, once old habits kicking in, already reaching for his phone. "I'll get you out of here," he blurted. "A new house nurse, a driver, everything. Lila May's laugh was quiet but firm, the kind that stops you mid-step. "Sit down, Marcus," she said, and somehow her voice carried more authority than any boardroom he'd ever owned. When he sat, she leaned in, eyes steady. "You still think money can erase time? You want to move me so you can soothe your guilt, not so I can be happy." Marcus swallowed shame, burning hot. "This house leaks," she continued, patting the worn table, "but it holds my memories. If you drag me into a cold mansion today, I'll die of loneliness, just like your babies were dying in that hotel." He stared at his sleeping sons, finally peaceful, and understood the choice she was giving him, not a shortcut, but a return. "Then tell me what to do," he whispered. Lila May nodded toward the back room. "You stay. You learn to be my son here, before you ask me to live in your world." And for the first time in 15 years, Marcus didn't negotiate. He simply breathed, nodded, and said, "I'm staying." Sometimes the thing we're trying to fix isn't a problem. Money can solve. It's a wound. Only presence can heal. Love doesn't come from upgrades. It comes from showing up, telling the truth, and rebuilding what we abandoned one humble day at a time. If this story hit you anywhere in the heart, tell me in the comments. Who in your life deserves a knock on the door you've been avoiding? And if you want more stories like this, raw, cinematic, and real, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one.